Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Youth Rights Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about emancipation and specifically why the process of emancipation is so difficult and then how it creates challenges for young people trying to get emancipation. We're here with another NYRA volunteer. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Bailey McCoy, and I will be talking about emancipation and how it negatively impacts minors with the laws that restrict them from being able to do so.
Emancipation as a process, basically it is considered like removing the disabilities of a minor, which basically means that because minors, they normally don't have the ability to enter into contracts, they don't have the ability to make like educational and medical decisions for themselves. Like they have parents have parental rights over them. And what emancipation does is it basically removes the control of the parents. It allows them to like be able to legally enter into contracts, to legally enter into binding agreements, and allows them to make decisions for themselves, including educational, medical decisions, without the need for like a parent or like another adult co-signer. So that's basically emancipation summarized, but most of the time it's really only available for older teenagers, like 16 or 17, depending on state law. And then some states, don't even have any clear pathway for emancipation at all, like no statute, no anything for it. So, what I first want to talk about is why minors need emancipation. Like, what are the types of cases or like situations that a young person is living with that would cause them to want to get emancipated or to realistically, in a lot of circumstances, need to get emancipated? What do you think for that?
Yes, so a lot of minors and teenagers are unfortunately in situations where their parents are rude to them or judgmental or harsh, and that in itself creates a lot of problems. But also, some parents will even try to stop their teenager or whatever from doing what is necessary to become independent.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, I've spoken to a lot of people who their parents have like limited their ability to do just like regular things, like parents who wouldn't let their kids get a job or wouldn't let them like make money. Like I talked to someone who like her mom literally went into her bank account and just stole money from her. And that happened to me as well when I was a teenager. Um so when parents hinder young people's ability to be independent and to be like move from being a teenager to being an adult, like it's obviously setting them up for failure when they eventually become an adult because they've been hindered and put down by these parents. So in a lot of those situations, it's best for them to be able to have this independence and to have this legal independence away from their parents, and emancipation is probably the best option for them.
Their parents stop them from doing what they need to do to be ready, and boom, now they're 18 and they don't have nothing.
And a lot of it comes back to the fact that there are so many legal restrictions put on minors to their ability to like, just do basic things. Like, for example, if you're a minor, you can't like buy or rent a house on your own. You can't enter into contracts. That's the biggest thing, is you can't enter into contracts independently. You have to have like an adult co-signer, because like minors technically have this legal ability to void contracts. So then, nobody wants to sign a contract with them because then it's not entirely legally binding. So it creates this really interesting situation where they need to rely on adults. They need to rely, and a lot of the times that ends up being their parents. So in order to get things like bank accounts or employment or housing, a lot of the times they have to rely on their parents to be able to do these things. And then, like we've mentioned, if the parents are, restricting of that or don't want them to be able to like do these certain things, it then creates the situation where, because of the fact that minors have limited legal autonomy, they can't do these things on their own, which is, a big reason of why emancipation would be better for them, because emancipation gives minors this legal right to be able to enter into these contracts and make these decisions without the need of their parents or an adult co-signer or something like that.
A lot of times, at least here in California, if you want to get emancipated, the court often requires that your parents agree with the idea of you getting emancipated, and they also require that you already have a stable source of income and that you have what you need to be independent and to continue attending school and work. And it's like the problem with that is that you need your parents' permission to get any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's like a big issue, and it kind of creates this paradox basically of you need emancipation, you need the independence given to you by emancipation to be able to make these independent decisions, to be able to get housing, to be able to get employment, to be able to have like control of your finances. But you can't have those things unless you get emancipated. But in order to get emancipated, you have to show that you already have these things. So it just creates this feedback loop, this paradox almost, where young people are just severely limited and they're trapped because they don't have the ability to prove these things in order to get emancipated.
Exactly. And when they don't have any of those resources, like you said, they can't get emancipated, but then they can't get those resources unless they are emancipated, and it creates a whole just problematic feedback loop, like you said. And it's like they're in a catch-22 where no matter what, they're still stuck in the same situation. I know from personal experience, like when I was still a minor, there were times where like I just really wanted to get emancipated, but then every time I would do research, I would just be like, I don't have any of these things because I technically need to be emancipated to get most of these things, unless I have parental consent to get them, which is kind of the whole point of why I'm trying to get emancipated.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's kind of the biggest issue with this type of stuff. And there's a lot of circumstances as well where there is just kind of like a lack of clear emancipation laws. Like I know you're in California and I'm in Texas, and both those states actually do have pretty clear emancipation laws. But a lot of smaller states, they don't have any statute on emancipation, like at all. They don't have any proceedings. Like some states, rarely they make it to where like a minor can just petition to be emancipated themselves. But like other states, they have no way for minors to do that. The only way for a minor to get emancipated is if they like join the military or they get married or sometimes there's court cases for emancipation if like there's already like an ongoing custody battle, then like the parents can try to get the kid emancipated themselves, but it's like the minor can't initiate those proceedings on their own. And that's kind of the whole point, is like minors should be able to initiate the proceedings of emancipation on their own. And then a lot of times when there's not a clear statute on it, makes it to where when they're trying to figure this stuff out, they like are just relying on very vague, like, and it's basically just up to the judge's like discretion. And it's very vague, and like a lot of the time it's subjective. So it's like one judge may be like, okay, yeah, this is a fair situation. The other judge may be like, no, absolutely not, when it's the same situation, because there's not this like standardized, clear emancipation statute. And on top of that, what you mentioned about needing parental consent to get emancipated, like a lot of states make it to where the parent has to agree to get for the child to be able to be emancipated, which most of the time for those types of states, they only want emancipation to exist in circumstances where it benefits the parent. Like, let's say the parent doesn't want to be financially supporting the kid. That's when they want emancipation to exist. But they completely ignore the situations where it is the minor themselves that want to be emancipated and to not want to have to be relying on their parents. They don't care about that. They don't care about the actual minor's rights and the youth rights to get emancipated. They just care about the situations where it benefits the parent.
Exactly, and that's just very, very wrong, because I mean it just is not okay, because emancipation should be in place so that youth can be able to have the freedom and independence that they want and that they need, especially if their parents are trying to hinder them from obtaining that. And then the fact that they require parental consent, like you said, it leads to a situation where it's benefiting the parent more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the circumstances where it doesn't actually benefit the parent, it's like it's impossible for the minor to be able to get it. Also, one of the biggest issues with that is like if the parents don't consent and then the minor has to kind of like argue it in court, minors have such a limited ability to even get legal representation. Like a lot of the times, a minor can't just like hire a lawyer on their own. Even if they have the money, a lot of times lawyers won't even take those cases, like at all. So it makes it to where they have to be legally represented by like another adult. There has to be like a third party adult that represents the interests of the minors, which is like sometimes that will happen. Sometimes they're in a situation where, let's say, they're like living with like another adult instead of their parents who like is actually trying to support them. But if they're not, it makes it to where they don't even have the ability to get the legal representation needed to argue this emancipation case in court, because a lot of the times it's the parents that are responsible for getting legal representation for the minor in other cases. But obviously you can't get they can't rely on the parents for that, and they can't get it themselves.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it creates a situation where it's like, how are they supposed to do this? Like, they have to rely, they still, in order to be able to get this independence and be able to gain this legal autonomy, they're forced to not have legal autonomy and rely on others, even in the proceedings of trying to gain the autonomy. And that's, again, it goes back to this paradox of how it just doesn't make sense, and it makes door emancipation is exceedingly difficult of a process for anyone to be able to acquire.
Yeah, and it just makes no sense. And what I really don't like about it either is that it's not even just emancipation. It's like a lot of different like laws in the legal system. It's like they conflict with each other. I mean, like another random example of that is like employers are legally prohibited from discriminating against employees, but then if they fire or refuse to hire the employee, a lot of times they don't even have to provide a reason. So if it's discrimination, they don't get caught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
And that's
sure.
like a similar thing that just creates a catch-22 where the laws literally conflict with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it to where, there is just so much discrimination against young people. And it's like, a lot of times, like, employers wouldn't want to hire, like, a young person, um, who, because they have to, they have to have this reliance on, like, parents and stuff like that. So it's really difficult for a minor to have, like, stable employment. Like, maybe they can work, like, a fast food job or something, but it's like, it's really difficult for them to get a more stable job without first being emancipated and having that independence that comes with it. But if having a stable job, or like a higher earning job, is a requirement for emancipation, then it's like, they're kind of in a really harmful situation. Some of the only circumstances, like some of the more common circumstances where emancipation actually occurs, is in circumstances of like child actors, or like child influencers, children who like make a lot of money because of like some type of like career that they've already had, that their parents have like kind of put them into. That a lot of the times they can get emancipated because they have like a lot of finances, like they've made a lot of money on their own. But a lot of the times what happens with them as well is the parents will actually like financially exploit them, and then like the kid will be making all the money, and then the parents will be trying to take the money from them. And there were circumstances like that. I can't remember the exact one off the top of my head, but they'll be like when the courts find out that the parent is like basically taking all of the money that the kid is earning, and like financially exploiting their kids, that's like a gateway for them to get emancipated as well, since they have these independent finances and stuff like that. But again, they're a lot of the times they're really only in these career spots because of their parents putting them in these career spots. It's like very rarely is it like the minor doing it by themselves. Like for influencers is a good example of that, because a lot of times like minors can like they can start making content on social media, and they can like build that up themselves without needing a parent for that. And that's why social media is really important for minors, because it is one of the only ways that they can actually like get a career, like a high paying career on their own, without having to rely on like parents and stuff like that. But when it comes to like child actors and like child models and stuff like that, like people who are in that, they rely so heavily on their parents, because like the parents are the one entering them into the contract, since they can't even sign their own contracts and stuff like that, and the parents are the ones financially exploiting them as well. So like that is a circumstance where emancipation usually happens a bit more often. But at the same time, it's like it shouldn't just be reserved for like these really high level parental financial exploitation cases. Emancipation should be a lot more accessible for like the average person, as long as they can prove that like, yeah, their parents are hindering their ability to be independent, their ability to succeed, those types of things.
Exactly. And if their parents are hindering their ability to do all of that kind of stuff, and if their parents are creating problems for them and they want to get emancipated, what I also believe is that the court should have like resources and things in place to help the youth transition smoothly into that independence, so that they can be successful, especially in situations like that where their parents are hindering their abilities and they just want to be emancipated. Like, for example, a good idea would be like to offer something like a voluntary like mentor or something that is automatically designated to help them if they want or need help with getting resources and learning things like the adult world. Like if they need help or guidance with stuff like that and they get granted emancipation, they should be offered like a mentor that's designated to help them.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's like other situations. I like what you mentioned about that because a lot of the times, like the parents are the ones trying to hinder their independence, but then they use, like, courts say, oh, you're not independent enough so you can't be emancipated, but it's like that's the whole thing that I'm trying to get. So I feel like a lot of the times they won't even courts don't even see that as a real issue. Like they won't see that as a reason to like remove a kid from their parents, something like that, like because it's like it's that type of parental oppression stuff where it's not really child abuse, it's just kind of like overbearing control that they don't really see as a real issue, but it hinders someone's life so heavily that it's like if someone's dealing with that type of situation. So I feel like emancipation is the solution in those cases, and emancipation is such this very rare process that only occurs in like these extremely niche situations, and I feel like it should be more normalized of a process for, like, let's say for example, like if a kid's getting abused in their home, that is usually when like foster care comes in, the kid gets removed from the home. But let's say a kid is being extremely hindered by their parents for independence, like isn't allowed to get a job, can't have financial independence, stuff like that, or like their education's getting hindered. That's a big thing as well. That should be when emancipation then comes in. Like these two processes should be like kind of side by side, of like one is for abuse and one is for hindering independence. Like it should be a lot more normalized for minors just to be able to be like, okay, my parents are creating unreasonable barriers on my ability to succeed and my ability to become an adult. I should be able to get emancipated. And then there should be like resources. Like you said, I do think there should be resources for like allowing these kids to actually enter adulthood, because a lot of the time it's like they have the mindset to be independent, but they just don't have like the knowledge or experience because of the fact of what their parents have been putting them through.
Exactly. And like you said, it just creates a lot of problems for them. And when their parents are hindering their ability to become independent and they want to get emancipated so that they can escape that kind of control, but then if they get emancipated, they don't have any help or anything to help them or guide them. And it creates a situation where emancipation is very rare and it's just not accessible at all. Like it's just literally not accessible, and that's why it's so rare and why you don't really hear about specific emancipation cases, and you don't hear individuals saying they got emancipated because it's not a common or normalized legal process, and it's very rare and inaccessible.
And one of the biggest issues with it as well is, this sort of presumption that young people are like incompetent or that they can't be taken seriously or that they're stupid or something like that. I mean, it's because of the fact that like adults the ones in control of all of these type of proceedings. And a lot of the times when these older adults look at young people trying to exert this independence, they just, they're going to value what the parents say over what the minors. A lot of the times they'll be like, if they're bringing up legitimate issues of like, oh yeah, my education's being hindered or something like this, they're just gonna be like, yeah, just it's not that big of a deal. I just deal with it, like non-issue. Like they're gonna treat it like that. They're not gonna treat it as like a real, actual issue. And a lot of the times they'll feel like young people aren't capable of making major life decisions. Like even if they're in the mindset of that they can, they'll be like, okay, well yeah, you're not currently, like if they're not currently living independently or something like that. But it's like, how are we supposed to be able to be living independently from our parents when we still don't have legal autonomy because we're not emancipated? That's like the major issue with that, is they're like, oh yeah, you're not capable of making these decisions, like you're not independent. But it goes back to that paradox if you can't really achieve the independence without the emancipation process. And it makes it to where like these young people are kind of stuck in these situations of just being forced to rely on their parents. And if their parents are like controlling or manipulative or abusive or like just stopping them from doing basic things, then they have no way out. Like a lot of the times, like how are they even supposed to get independent housing? Like I guess technically what usually happens is it would be considered independent housing if they're like with a third party adult that isn't their parent. But because of stuff like harboring a runaway laws, like minors aren't even allowed to like leave their parents and go to another home without their parents' consent, or the parents can like call the police on them and they can get picked up by the police and forced to go back with their parents. So it's like you're literally not even allowing them to even have any amount of independence of where they live and like where they reside and stuff like that. Because of the fact that they don't have, because of the fact that they're a minor, they don't have this legal independence. So like obviously, it's going to be extremely difficult for minors to be able to do this, which just goes back into we need to have clearer requirements for emancipation, which doesn't just mean you have to be showing all these independence and these things. It has to be like you have to show the ability to. It's like you have to, kind of have like this mature, independent mindset of like I will be able to do these things once I'm out of the situation that is currently hindering my ability to do things. Like you have to show that you're knowledgeable, like you're informed about this type of stuff. And then again, like you said, they should offer resources to like further educate young people to like help them make this transition without their parents, so emancipation can be more normalized of a legal process that isn't just this extremely niche rare thing.
Exactly. And it's like you said, like they put all of these different barriers in front of every method that you could possibly use in the book to be independent. They just literally put barriers in front of everything. And then that's literally why emancipation is basically just impossible and inaccessible. And like you also said, they should like change it to where you don't necessarily have to like be independent in the moment, because that's just not going to happen if your parents won't let you. And but like more overall, like where you have the determination and the willpower and the knowledge to be able to be independent like that, and to be able to handle those types of things in the adult world. But it should be more about like if you're like determined enough and knowledgeable enough about that kind of stuff, rather than like purely depending on if you're living on your own already and you already have a job and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of better ways to approach the emancipation process. I mean, we've listed a few, but I feel like I mean, you're in California, and I feel like that actually is the state with the lowest like minimum age limit for emancipation. Like it's 14 in California. Most states have it at 16 or 17, and then some states they don't. If they don't have a clear statute on emancipation, they don't list an age limit. But a lot of the times don't even consider it unless it's like 16 or 17. So California is probably the best with that. But then there's like some other states. I think Louisiana is another one where instead of having these strict requirements, because I know in Texas it's like you have to show independent housing, independent finances, independent employment. Well, in like Louisiana, there's they have a clause about emancipation for good cause, which basically shows like if it's, which is kind of like in a best interest type of thing. It's like if you can show that emancipation is in the best interest and it's for like a good cause, then they're more likely to grant it. So I feel like that should kind of be what the courts look at, rather than like if you are already independent. They have to look at like if you have the ability to be independent, like do you have that determination? Are you informed? Like, do you know about these things? Do you know like how to do these certain processes? And then like, is it going to benefit your life? Like, are your parents currently hindering your life and making it to where it's impossible for you to do these certain things? That would be like emancipating you would then be in good cause. So I feel like that is kind of a good I guess basis for emancipation of like, is it in good cause? Will it benefit your life? Do you have like the mindset and like informed knowledge to be independent once you are given the legal autonomy to actually have independence? And then I feel like that should be something that they're looking at. And then I feel like there probably should, I don't feel like there should be like a minimum age limit on emancipation. Cause like I mean 14 is a good way to start, but I feel like there's a lot of other circumstances where like younger minors could also maybe get emancipated. Like maybe even if they're not trying to do everything themselves, like maybe if they just don't want to be living with their parents, so they like go to like maybe like a grandparent or like another individual, like another third party adult, and they can get probably emancipated through that. Like even if they're like pretty young, like maybe like 12, 13, stuff like that, they could still probably like they still be able to deserve to be able to get emancipated, even if they're not trying to do everything on their own as well. So I feel like those are kind of the things that emancipation should be based on, is like these actual like things that make a lot more sense, rather than either not having a clear statute on emancipation at all, or making it to where the requirements are really difficult and don't even really make sense.
Exactly. And like when you mentioned like how people younger than 14 should still have like a way to initiate that kind of stuff, like even like living with another adult or grandparent or somebody that they trust. Like there's something like kind of going along those lines that's here in California. I'm sure some other states have it, but it's called legal guardianship, and basically what that means is that like a parent, if a parent is incapable, or if it's like going against the child's best interest, another adult, like a friend or another family member or somebody that's another adult, can technically legally apply for guardianship, and they can like go ahead and prove why they should be granted legal guardianship over the youth, which the main point is pointing out like why the biological parent is incapable of taking care of them. But some issues with even that law is that, first of all, the adult has to be the one applying for legal guardianship. As far as I know, it can't be like the minor applying to have them as their legal guardian.
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, like the law is very strict about like what's considered the parent not being capable of taking care of the child efficiently. And then what's also a problem about it is that the courts will almost always prioritize people who are relatives and who are like older and more mature, rather than like, because like if like they have a friend or a friend's mom in their 20s, and that's obviously not a relative, and if they're in their 20s and they're not a relative, it's very unlikely that the court is going to grant that, even if the child feels like it's better for them or they would rather have that than their biological parent.
Mm-hmm. I actually do like that there is a legal guardianship system in California. I wasn't aware of that. I'm not sure how many other states have that, but I do like that there is at least a
Mm-hmm.
process for it. But yeah, I definitely agree that these processes need to be more like streamlined. And I feel like one of the biggest issues is, we've talked about this before about how they prioritize this parental control so heavily. It's like when CPS tries to pick up a minor who may be in like an abusive situation, the primary goal is always to reunify them with the parents if possible. And then like same thing for like runaway rights and stuff like that. They pick up a young person that's running away, they're always going to try to take them back to the parent, even if they're saying like I don't want to go back, stuff like that. So it's like they really prioritize so heavily this parental control, so they're always going to side with the parents over like another adult, or even the best interest or like the best wishes of what the young person is saying they want out of the situation, unless there's like overwhelming evidence that the parent is, being a problem. Some of this stuff is very subjective of like what is considered even the parent hindering the life of like the young person. Like let's say like a parent is like really heavily like restricting like the relationships the young persons will have, like restricting their friendships, like not letting them leave the house for certain things, like maybe hindering their education, like saying, oh yeah, you're not allowed to be part of this like extracurricular activity or something like that. Those types of things are like big hindrances, but a lot of the times like it's very subjective of like one judge may be like, okay, yeah, that's a valid issue, and then another one will be like, oh yeah, that's just a parent, that's just parenting, like who cares, that doesn't matter. Or like there's a lot of stuff like that, like overbearing responsibilities, like let's say like a kid is forced to do like basically every single chore in the house, that it's like harming them. I mean, I've known friends who it's like they have so much responsibility put on them by their parents, where it's like hindering their education, hindering their like relationships with others, hindering basically their life, their mental health. But if you talk to someone about it, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's just parenting, that's just responsibility, like they should just be taught that. And it's like it's a very thin line of, or very blurry line of, what is considered like actually damaging someone's life versus, oh yeah, the parents just parenting. So because the fact it's so vague, so I feel like there definitely needs to be a lot stricter of like, if this action by the parent is damaging the child's mental health or damaging their life or hindering their ability to be independent, that should be grounds for legal guardianship proceedings or emancipation proceedings, stuff like that, rather than it having to just be this overwhelming amount of evidence to even get past this like subjective bias and the legal system's bias in itself of always prioritizing the parental authority.
Yeah, and it's very crazy how strict they are on prioritizing parental control and parental rights. And what's very unfortunate is that parental rights and stuff like that are literally embedded into the Constitution. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just very, very unfortunate, because it's like I mean, like I've mentioned this before too, like there you back like decades ago, women didn't have rights, and that was a whole civil rights thing that was like just a long battle just to get women's rights. Now I feel like we're trying to do a very similar thing, but to get youth rights. Like youth are human beings, and they deserve to be able to have the human rights that every adult has.
Mm-hmm. And also it's like I really don't like this like huge emphasis on parental rights because it's like they act like because the parents are a parent of this minor, they then have like a right to them. They have this like basically this ownership of them. It's basically about property. It's like saying, oh yeah, you have this constitutional right to have like your own property. It's like, oh yeah, you have a constitutional right to have your kids. But it's like if the kid is an independent individual, it's not like a piece of property. It's not like a sandwich or like a car. Like it's its own person with its own independent thoughts and ideas. So that doesn't mean they should be treated in the same way that like a piece of property would, and that doesn't mean that a parent should have a right, like should have rights over them. I don't like that. I feel like they shouldn't be given any other preference than any other adult. Like if it comes down to, oh, the parent be having the this authority or like the guardianship rights over this child, or should it be like another adult that the child is currently living with, who actually the child wants to live with, who actually isn't causing them problems? There shouldn't be any preference for the parent. Like just because the parent has this biological relation, that shouldn't mean anything. Like they shouldn't own the kid. They shouldn't have this like right to them, it more than any other adult should. That's the thing of like they really try to prioritize that because sometimes because a lot of the times it just depends on where you get born. Like if you get born into a family where you have really nice parents who like want to help and support you, then that's like great. But if you get born into a family where you have like really unstable, really toxic parents, very overbearing, like parents who don't really have your best interests at heart, then you're put so far down in life because of the fact that your parents have so much control over you. It's like you shouldn't give any preference to this adult, this parent over any other adult who like is actually trying to benefit you. And I feel like that's what people are so unwilling to accept because they like the fact that parents and adults like the fact that they have this control, they have this like right, that they have this ownership basically over another human being.
And that's one of the biggest issues of all that's keeping parents with the ability to hold on to these rights is that only adults' opinions matter, like in the legal and political world, because minors and youth do not have any like voting rights or anything like that. And so they literally have no voice and no say in what laws and policies and society like we have. Like they have no voice over it, even though they're literally the ones who are going to be living in the future of what is being created right now. They're the ones who are going to be living through that.
And also it goes down to the fact that they don't have control over the actual policies that affect them. Like if there's a policy, if the politicians, if Congress is voting on a law that, let's say, bans minors off of social media, every single person who is going to be like voting on that, or is going to be voting to put in place those politicians that are making those laws, is not going to be a minor. Like the one demographic that is affected by these regulations is the one demographic that has no choice in appointing the representatives that are making these regulations. And that's where that biggest problem lies. Is that's why voting rights, all of these issues with youth rights goes back to voting rights, because if minors actually had the ability to vote and represent themselves in politics, then it would make it to where it would be a lot more difficult for people in power to put in these systems that just completely disregard youth voices. Because if you have to be held accountable to your voters, you're not going to put something into place that directly harms your voters, because then you won't get reelected. But they don't have to worry about that because they're not held accountable to youth. Nobody is, because youth don't have the ability to hold their politicians or like systems accountable. They're not in charge of any amount. They don't have any authority in making the policies that directly affect them. Young people are getting directly affected, and in a lot of circumstances directly harmed by things that they have absolutely no control over, and instead the adults are the ones voting on these things or voting for the representatives that are going to be putting these things into place, and they're not going to be worrying about the youth voices. They're going to be worrying about their own opinions on the matter.
Yeah, and then obviously, like with parents and adults being the only ones with authority and power to vote and to control what kind of society we live in, they're obviously going to choose what benefits them the most and helps them maintain their parental authority and control over the youth. And that's just completely messed up and like completely misses the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if there's a bill about parental rights or like something like that, it's like it's basically the bill is one demographic, adults, and their control over another demographic, minors. So, but if only one demographic is allowed to vote on it or passing it or voting for the representatives that are putting it into place, and the other demographic that's getting negatively affected has absolutely no ability to be able to do that, then it's like it's impossible for there to it's impossible for it to lose, basically. Like that's like saying that there's a bill that gets put into place of, oh yeah, should we take away women's right to vote, but the only people that get to vote in it are men and women don't get to vote on it. Like that's it would be the same thing as that. Like it's relying on this corrupt way of, you know, the rights for youth basically being decided by adults and being decided by people in authority put in place by only adults rather than youth. And you know that goes back to every single system. That can go back to any single legal restriction that is put on minors. It's because of the fact that they don't have their own ability to represent themselves or to like have a voice. And that's why social media is also so important, because that's like one of the only ways that they can represent themselves. Like they can't vote, they can't run for office, but you know, they could maybe have a voice on social media to try to get people to like listen to what they say or try to get the politicians to be held accountable to them. But then, you know, and that's why, in my opinion, that's why they're trying to put these restrictions of, oh yeah, we're banning anyone under 16 off social media. It's like they don't want to be held accountable to young people. They don't. Like the people in power don't want that to happen. And it really all goes back to that.
Exactly. And it really is just completely messed up because, like you said, they literally are creating that law to ban social media from minors because they do not want minors or youth to have any voice of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's very messed up and it's very dehumanizing towards those youth and minors. It's very corrupt and dehumanizing and just very unacceptable.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I feel. But it's like realistically, it's like who knows if that's gonna be able to change anytime in the future? Because in order to get that to change, you first have to give young people voting rights. Like that is the first step to changing any of these things. So that instead of relying on adults to do this, it's like the politicians actually being held accountable to young people. So I feel like it's kind of really a paradox, and I feel like all of this stuff, especially you know going back to the original topic of emancipation, all of it is a paradox. It's like young people can't do these things because they're relying on a system that isn't put in place to help them, and that's really what it comes back to.
And what's also like very very interesting to think about is that like I mean personally for me because I obviously like grew up in the foster care system and everything, one thing I intend on doing like when I get a little bit older and get like more established and stable financially and everything, one thing I plan to do is like I'm going to be personally fostering and adopting kids because I know what it's like to be put in home environments where I'm not supported and I'm not treated like I belong and my voice doesn't matter. And so when I foster and adopt those kids, I would be giving them, first of all, the loving, safe, caring home that they deserve. And second of all, I would be giving them a place where they have a voice over their lives and their future. Like, for example, they say that youth cannot vote at all. Well, here's something that's crossed my mind before as an idea is like when I become a foster parent or an adoptive parent or whatever, I plan to talk to whatever kids I'm fostering and adopting whenever the elections are happening, and I would be basically going ahead and showing them like what like who's up for office or what possible laws are being voted on, and I would show them and I would like show them how to research those things. And what I would do is I would then go ahead and ask them, I would be like, what would you vote on this? And whatever they tell me they would vote for, that is what I would vote for on their behalf.
That's that's really like noble of you to actually try to do that. And I wish more people had that, like they had that ideal close to them. That like I feel like
Yes.
a lot of people wouldn't do that. But talking about fostering and like adoption and stuff like that, there's also age discrimination in that, like heavily. Like
Mm-hmm.
in most states you can't adopt until you're 21. And then in some states you're not even allowed to adopt until you're 25. And I think I haven't done research on this, but I'm pretty sure it's the same for foster parenting. And they put these age restrictions, like arbitrary age restrictions on foster parenting as well, where it's like you can't foster until you're like
Oh, yeah.
21. So, that's another form of age discrimination, because I feel like with so many of these things, I feel like age shouldn't even be considered. It's like, yeah, sometimes you're gonna have like an 18-year-old who may not be mature enough to foster, and it's like, but there's also can be like a 26-year-old who's not mature enough to foster. It could be the same way. So obviously,
Yeah.
for adoption and foster parenting, like people actually like social work and stuff, they come over, they talk, they do interviews, they check out the home and stuff like that. And that's when they deem if someone can be a foster parent or not, or like for the adoption, they like interview them and talk to them. So it's like they have that final decision. So it's like if they see an adult who may not be competent enough, then they could just deny that right to them, which is like, okay, why does that not apply to young people? Why does that not apply? Like if a 19-year-old is trying to adopt, why don't they get scrutinized in the same way that an adult is? Because I guarantee you, not every 19-year-old on the planet is going to be immature and incapable of making these decisions. So it's like they should have their lives and the context of them as an individual scrutinized in the same way that like a 25-year-old would. But
Yes.
instead they put in these arbitrary age restrictions to say that if you're younger than this age, we're not even going to consider you, we're not even going to look at it, we're not even going to talk to you, you don't even get the opportunity. And it just makes absolutely
Right.
no sense, that type of stuff, because then all that's going to do is literally limit the ability of people to get adopted. Like I know if someone's in a foster care situation, they probably would want to get adopted into like a loving, like a home that you were talking about, like how you would be treating your foster kids. They'd want that, but it's like
Yes.
the less young people that have the ability to do that, the less minors are getting adopted or put into foster care placements in general. Like there's just obviously, if you restrict like anyone under this age from doing it, there's just going to be less homes in general. And it's like you could probably speak on this. They need homes. Like they need to get to these places instead of being where they currently are in a lot of circumstances. And I feel like that's just another unnecessary age restriction.
Right. And I can definitely speak on that. Like, there's definitely a massive shortage in like foster and adoptive parents. And a major part of it is the amount of restrictions that they put on even becoming a foster or adoptive parent. And one of those restrictions, like you said, is age restrictions, where you have to be a certain age to be even considered to become a foster or adoptive parent. And that's just crazy to me because it's like why do I have to be a certain age when somebody 10 years older than me could be just as when somebody 10 years older than me could be completely incapable, but then just because they're older than me they'd be more considered. Like, that makes no sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've lived like my aunt and uncle. They were trying to have a baby, but they couldn't have it naturally. So they went and they did IVF. And when like we asked them, I was like, "Why wouldn't you just adopt?" They were talking about, they looked into it, and there were so many restrictions put on adoption that they literally said it was easier for them to do IVF, and it was easier and more accessible for them to do that than for them to go through the adoption process. Like, and that's like insane that they put so many restrictions on this, because like ideally they would want young people to get adopted, like they would want minors in the foster care system to go into foster to have foster homes and to be adopted. But when they put so many restrictions on it, it's just it seems like the only thing that's going to do is limit the amount of, you know, young people who are getting like put into foster homes and who are getting adopted. And then it will go into like, and then, you know, then after that, if they don't really have the homes, then where are they gonna go? Like group homes and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah.
those obviously aren't the best. So, you know, it really all comes back to the fact that there's so many unnecessary restrictions put on things that don't actually consider the young people. They don't actually consider like what's happening in the young people's lives. You know, going back to emancipation, it's like the same way. But yeah, I think that's pretty much good for the episode. Is there anything else that you want to like leave off on, or like anything else you want to say about it?
I think we covered what needed to be covered. And yeah, just crazy how those laws are literally supposed to be designed for the minors, but they're actually designed to go against the minors if you really think about it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's kind of with emancipation. It's like what we need to focus on is it being in the best interest of the minor, and you know, focusing on their ability to be independent rather than if they currently are, because it's a paradox of that they really can't achieve that independence without first being emancipated. And I feel like that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. But yeah, thank you all for tuning into the episode, and we'll see y'all in the next one. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye.